The history of the Middle Ages is like a heavy blanket wrapped in the folds of time's dust and silence. Today, we will speak of a few still, dull images hidden beneath that blanket, which reveal the darker side of the medieval era. We will become acquainted with criminals whose lives were defined by lengthy, tiresome legal processes and the anticipation of an inevitable, slow consequence. Our journey will be one of complete tranquility, where there is no rush, only the stillness of time and the long, lazy pace of every event. The first figure in today's story is Thomas Brown, known to all as Black Tom. Black Tom was no grand or terrible brigand. He was a petty, ordinary thief whose main crime was stealing a small silver bowl from a church treasury. His life began slowly, and the consequences of his crime came at an even slower pace. Tom was caught early in the morning, when the fog still lay still upon the fields. The scene of his capture was not dramatic, but rather joyless. Tom was sitting in a horse-drawn cart, his manacled hands resting steadily on his knees. The cart was taking him to the magistrate in the nearby county town. That journey was exceedingly long. The wheels of the slow-moving cart turned slowly, slowly over the damp earth. Every pebble, every rut in the road caused the cart to shake, slowly. Tom had only one thought in his mind: waiting. When would this journey end? When would they arrive? When would he be questioned? Every minute felt like an hour, because medieval justice was primarily a matter of prolonged waiting. When they finally arrived at the small jailhouse, it was nearly noon. The jailhouse was built of stone, damp and cold. Tom's cell had no window, only a small iron-barred ventilator that cast a small circle of dull gray light onto the cell floor. Tom was pushed into the cell, and the heavy iron bolt was drawn across the door. The metallic clang of the bolt, though sharp for a moment, was immediately dulled by the surrounding silence. Tom sat down in a corner of his cell. The stone floor was cold, but the cell air was colder still. Now began the long, joyless wait for the trial. The magistrate was busy settling a land dispute in a distant village. He would not interrupt his work for a petty thief like Black Tom. Tom had to wait for 3 consecutive weeks. During these 3 weeks, Tom's life was completely unvarying. Every morning, a guard would slowly arrive to place stale bread and cold water on a wooden plate. The bread tasted monotonous, and the water was tasteless. Tom would slowly chew the bread, making each piece last a long time. The only sound in Tom's cell was the slow, steady drip of water falling from the ceiling onto the floor. Tom would observe that sound intently. Drip. He would often try to count the seconds between one drop and the next, but after a while his mind would abandon the counting, and he would sink again into a deep, steady void. The daylight entered the cell very slowly and faded even more slowly. There was no rush, only waiting. Tom would draw an invisible circle on the floor with his finger and then erase it. This repetitive act of drawing and erasing the circle distanced him from the concept of time. After 3 weeks, when every cell in Tom's body had adjusted to this waiting, he was slowly brought out of the jail. Now he would be taken to the magistrate's court. The courtroom was a large wooden room where the air was stuffy. The court clerk, who was writing Tom's indictment, performed his task in an even more laborious and tiresome manner. He wrote on the parchment paper with a feather quill, creating a slow, scratching sound. Every letter, every word was written with extreme caution to avoid any ink splatter. The reading of the indictment took nearly an hour. The long, monotonous voice drew out every legal term. Black Tom stood, his eyes steady, his ears numb. There was no hope or fear in his mind, only a feeling of utter exhaustion. The entire process felt like a massive, slow-motion drama where there was no place for excitement or a quick resolution. Then the magistrate pronounced the sentence. The judgment was yet another long speech. The gravity of the crime, its impact on society, and the fact that he would be kept in prison for an even longer period as punishment, everything was articulated in dull, irrelevant words. Tom was taken back to his cell. This time his waiting period was even longer. Years of the same stone floor, the same cold air, the same drip, drip, drip sound. This long, unvarying stillness was the essence of medieval incarceration. We will now move away from Tom's dull silence and enter the narrative of a woman named Marjorie, who was known as the queen of the fake coins. Marjorie's crime was economic, but the consequence of her life was just as slow and tiresome as Tom's. Marjorie made counterfeit coins. This work was extremely patient and demanded a long process. She had to sit silently for days on end, melting wax and lead and pouring them into molds. The slow, steady flow of the molten metal was the primary element of her work. There was no haste in this process, only patience and repetition. When Marjorie was caught, her interrogation was even longer and more tiresome. She was kept in a small room with only one table and 2 chairs. The interrogator would not rush to ask questions. He would first sit in silence for a long time, merely staring into Marjorie's eyes. The weight of this silence was heavier than any question. Marjorie felt as if time had stopped, and every minute detail of her crime was being extracted slowly, tediously. She had to wait for a long time for every answer, as the interrogator slowly prepared his feather quill to write down the response. Marjorie's court case was subject to even greater procrastination. Since it was related to currency, a great deal of paperwork, testimonies, and long accounting reports had to be examined. It took the judge months to slowly turn over the thick, heavy documents placed on the table. A hearing would take place, and each time it would be adjourned for another month. Marjorie would wait for a long time outside the court. Her time of waiting was only defined by the stone walls, the slow-moving light, and the slow, steady sound of breathing around her. In this prolonged process, every moment of Marjorie's life had become repetitive. Waking up in the morning, consuming a meager meal, walking at a slow pace towards the court, sitting for a long time in court, and returning without a decision. This cycle seemed never-ending. The excitement of Marjorie's crime had faded with time, leaving behind only prolonged waiting and tiresome stagnation. This was the nature of medieval justice, a kind of long mental incarceration where the punishment was not a moment, but rather uninterrupted waiting. We will continue to advance our long and deliberate narrative. From the stillness of Black Tom's prison and the protraction of Marjorie's trial, we now enter the world of a different kind of offender. Those who were petty and whose punishment was merely a prolonged social exclusion and the wait for penance. we will become acquainted with Flippa the fishwife, whose crime was minor market fraud with weights. Flippa's crime was small for the town market, but it was highly significant for medieval society because it disrupted the stability of trust. Flippa was caught when an inspector examined the stone weight used on her fish scale and found it to be slightly lighter. Flippa's arrest was swift, but its consequence was a long and tiresome social process. Flippa was first brought before the magistrate. The magistrate described Flippa's crime in his familiar, long, dull voice. Flippa was fined, but the real punishment was different. She was sentenced to stand in a punishment structure called the pillory for 1 day. This punishment was a symbol of stillness and silence. Standing in the pillory was a long, monotonous experience. The structure was made of wood, and Flippa's hands and head were tightly fastened within it. She had to stand from the break of dawn until sunset. The time was exceedingly long and slow-paced. Flippa could not move, she could not speak. Every muscle in her body slowly tightened. The sunlight slowly shifted across her face, and every moment was unvarying. The market people looked at her, but their gaze held no excitement, only long, dull attention. Occasionally, someone would hurl an insult at her, but most of the time was spent in deep silence. Flippa only waited, waiting for the sun to slowly begin to decline towards the west from its highest point, waiting for the daylight to slowly diminish and for her to be released. But even after her release, her punishment was not over. The shadow of prolonged social exclusion descended upon her. The other market vendors stopped speaking to her. Customers avoided buying fish from her. This exclusion was a long, languidly paced punishment. Flippa came to the market every morning, placed her basket of fish before her, and sat there for a long, silent time. Hour after hour, no one would even look her way. This uninterrupted silence and lack of attention was her real sentence. Flippa had to wait for a full year to regain her social standing. This year was a period of repetition, the same task every day, coming to the market, sitting, waiting, and returning home in the evening without any profit. This long, monotonous repetition left such an imprint on her mind that she lost all sense of excitement and stimulation. She became accustomed to only breathing slowly and passing time steadily. This dull, repetitive life was the ultimate consequence of petty crime in the Middle Ages. Now we will shift our focus to those offenders whose crimes were mysterious and whose trials proceeded through long, suspicious processes. We will look at a woodcutter named Barnard, who was suspected of colluding with a witch. There was no clear evidence against Barnard, only the long, suppressed whispers of his neighbors. These whispers eventually transformed into an accusation, and Barnard was brought before the magistrate. The trial process was dependent on long religious tests. Barnard was confined to a small room and told to recite a specific prayer for a long time every day. He was told to wait for a divine sign. This divine sign was exceedingly slow, almost lethargic. The judges believed that if any physical change occurred in Barnard, if his face became pale or his hands began to tremble, that would be the sign of witch collusion. Barnard spent his days in that small room in long, steady silence. He did not know how long this would continue. The daylight entered slowly, slowly through cracks in the stone, and even more slowly faded away. Every moment was one of uninterrupted prayer and steady waiting. Barnard breathed very slowly to ensure no physical movement would occur that might raise suspicion in the eyes of the judges. His life had become a slow-motion meditation, where his only job was to remain still. This trial process continued for 6 months. For 6 months, Barnard repeated the same prayer, lay on the same stone floor, and was submerged in the same silence. This prolonged mental pressure brought him to a point where he felt neither hope nor fear. His mind seemed completely detached from the concept of time. This slow, tiresome judicial process was the punishment for mysterious crimes in the Middle Ages. A long, aimless wait. This still narrative is taking you deeper into greater peace. You too are now lying still on that stone floor, just like Barnard. All thoughts, all worries are now slowly, slowly disappearing from your mind. Only deep, uninterrupted silence prevails. Our long, slow narrative will now take another turn toward deeper rest. Having concluded our discussion on the long, monotonous effect of medieval crime and punishment, we will now focus on offenders whose consequences involved long journeys and the wait for symbolic purification. We will look at Bartholomew the baker, whose crime was slightly altering the weight of his bread, and whose punishment was a long, languid march. Bartholomew's crime concerned the quality of his bread, which was highly important to common people. When his crime was discovered, he was not sent to any prison, but was instead given a long, symbolic, penitential journey. He was instructed to walk toward a holy monastery located far outside the town. This journey was exceedingly slow, long, and aimless. Bartholomew had to begin walking at the first light of morning and stop in the dull light of evening. His walking pace was deliberate and steady. Every step was calculated and tiresome. He wore no shoes, and every touch of the earth was painful yet unvarying. The road was long and monotonous. On both sides there were only the same fields, the same forests, and the same silence. Day after day Bartholomew continued slowly, slowly, looking at the same scenery. There was no hope or thought of a quick destination in his mind. There was only uninterrupted walking and the long, steady flow of time. The sole purpose of this journey was patience and physical exhaustion. Every evening when Bartholomew stopped at a village, he had to stand before the villagers and confess his crime for a long time. His voice was dull and heavy, and his words were repetitive. The villagers looked at him with dull attention, but there was no excitement in their eyes, only sympathy and steady silence. This journey continued for 3 months straight. For 3 months, Bartholomew performed the same actions, walking slowly, slowly, confessing his crime in the evening, and waiting to slowly, slowly start the journey again. This long physical and mental strain brought him to a point where every muscle in his body was merely craving rest. When Bartholomew finally reached the monastery gate, his walk was extremely slow and languid. The monastery door was vast and heavy. He stood before the door for a long time, simply waiting in silence for someone from inside the monastery to slowly, slowly open the door. Life inside the monastery was even more stable and silent. He had to pray for a long time every day, which was monotonous and repetitive. The air inside the prayer chamber was cold and sacred. The concept of time was completely obliterated there. Bartholomew spent the rest of his life in silence, prayer, and slow motion. This stillness and rest was his ultimate liberation. Bartholomew's long march and silent penance are now pulling you toward deep, languid rest, too. You are feeling the weight of Bartholomew's slow, tired steps on your feet. Your body is heavy, but your mind is calm. All restlessness, all rush is now slowly, slowly being removed from your mind. The long, slow, and monotonous narrative of these medieval criminals' lives is now enveloping you in complete silence and deep sleep. There is no sound around you, no movement, only stillness and uninterrupted comfort. Following Bartholomew's long, monotonous journey, our narrative will now turn toward its final silence. We will now look at those offenders whose punishment was steady solitude and the long wait for surrender. In this phase, we will look at Eustace the Hermit, who took self-imposed exile after committing a small theft against religious doctrine. His exile was a symbol of voluntary, prolonged solitude and silence. Eustace's crime was the theft of a few humble fruits from a monastery garden. After his crime was discovered, Eustace voluntarily surrendered to the monastery's judges and requested eternal silence as his punishment. The judges granted him permission to live in a distant cave located far from civilization. Eustace's cave was cold, dark, and damp. His life there became completely unvarying and repetitive. Every morning, the sunlight would come slowly, slowly towards the entrance of the cave, and then fade away very slowly again. Inside the cave, Eustace's only task was to sit silently for long periods. He would slowly, slowly carve marks on the walls of his cave with his finger, which was his only way of counting the days. This process of carving marks was extremely slow and focused. Each mark seemed to encapsulate the long, languid pace of an entire day. But after a while, he stopped counting. The concept of time vanished for him. The only sound inside Eustace's cave was the slow, steady sound of his breathing. He would breathe at an extremely slow pace to ensure no excitement or restlessness built up inside him. His life was a test of long, uninterrupted silence. He spoke to no one, saw nothing new, heard no new sounds. For many years, Eustace's life remained the same cold, the same darkness, and the same deep silence. His food consisted of a few wild fruits and water, the taste of which was monotonous and dull. There was no restlessness in his mind, only deep peace and stillness. This voluntary solitude was his ultimate punishment and his ultimate liberation. We will now enter the deep silence of Eustace. This silence is guiding you toward complete rest. Your body is now still and comfortable like Eustace's. All medieval restlessness, All the protraction of the trials, all the memories of the crimes are now slowly fading away from your mind. The ultimate goal of this long, slow, and monotonous narrative has been achieved. You are now completely calm. Your mind is steady and silent. There is no need to worry about anything anymore. Only deep, uninterrupted, and comfortable silence prevails. You are now merging with this silence. Nadekazai is now entering a steady loop, where only the message of peace and stability will be repeated. We have now reached the point where the concept of time is completely dissolved. We will now only listen to the echo of the long, steady silence that enveloped the lives of these medieval criminals. This echo is not a real sound. It is a profound feeling of mental stillness. Return to Eustace's cave, where for years only the slow, steady breathing was heard. The pace of that breathing was languid, deep, and comforting. You too now breathe at that same pace. Slowly, inhale. Slowly, exhale. This cycle of breathing is repetitive, calm, and unvarying. Every breath is helping you sink deeper into more rest. Imagine you are now standing at the very end of Bartholomew's long march. Your feet are tired, your body is heavy, but there is no need to walk now, only standing still. This stillness is giving your body complete comfort. You are feeling your muscles slowly softening, relaxing. Now bring your focus inside Black Tom's cell. The cold stones around you are no longer uncomfortable. Instead, they are making your body steady and weightless. The drip, drip, drip sound of the water falling has now transformed into a calm, monotonous rhythm near your ear. This rhythm is slowly lulling you to sleep. Drip, drip, drip. This rhythm only carries the message of stillness and deep peace. No more crime, no more judgment, no more waiting, only uninterrupted rest. Every word of this long, slow narrative is now slowly fading from your mind. You are now inside the loop of this deep silence where time has no beginning or end. Your eyes are closed. Your body is completely relaxed. No thought or worry can enter your mind. You are simply slowly sinking deeper. Our long, slow narrative will now enter the tale of Alice the Armless, whose crime was a small act of forgery, but whose punishment was a long wait for physical helplessness in the eyes of society. Alice's punishment was public mutilation, but the nature of this punishment was such that it did not end life quickly, but rather pushed it toward prolonged, steady helplessness. One of Alice's arms was severed in public. The punishment was a type of symbolic death sentence that did not take life, but merely made life extremely slow and arduous. The act of mutilation itself was slow and cautious to minimize blood loss and ensure Alice would survive for a long time. But the real punishment began after the long wait for her recovery. Alice was brought home. Her life became completely unvarying and monotonous. She had to perform all of life's tasks with only one arm. Even the smallest task, such as eating, dressing, or combing her hair, became extremely slow, tiresome, and time-consuming. From the moment she woke up in the morning until she went back to bed at night, her every moment was a long repetition of physical struggle. She moved around her house slowly, slowly. There was no rush in anything. She lacked the physical capacity to rush. Once a task began, it took a long time to finish. She would sit for hours, merely preparing her mind to perform a specific task. That period of preparation was one of long, steady silence. To society, Alice was a symbol of steady stigma. People would see her, but no one would approach her. As they walked past her, they walked very slowly, as if her presence should not disturb their normal pace in any way. Alice's life was one of long, languidly paced social isolation. In this solitude, Alice performed only one task for a long time: sewing. Sewing with one hand was an extremely slow and focused task. The needle would slowly, slowly pierce the cloth, and even more slowly emerge. Each stitch was a still moment that dissolved the concept of time. This uninterrupted repetitive work led her into a deep, meditative state. All stimulation, all excitement had vanished from Alice's life. Her existence became a long reflection of stillness and exhaustion. This dull, slow flow of life is now pulling you towards deep, uninterrupted rest. You are now sitting in Alice's room. A needle and thread are in your hand. You are slowly, slowly sewing. Every stitch, every slow, cautious movement is making your mind calm and weightless. Your breathing is deep and slow. Slowly, sew. Slowly, breathe. This long, monotonous repetition is helping you sink deeper into greater peace. All medieval worries are now slowly, slowly unraveling like Alice's thread. Your body is now very heavy and comfortable. No sound, no movement, only stillness and deep rest. Our long, slow narrative will now enter the world of another long, monotonous medieval punishment, following Alice the Armless's slow sewing and prolonged steady helplessness. The tale of Robert the Reeker. Robert's crime was professional dishonesty, but his punishment was the long, repetitive cycle of symbolic impurity and social exclusion. Robert was a leather craftsman whose job was to process dead animal hides, but he sold the animal hides through dishonest means. After his crime was discovered, the judge gave him an unusual punishment. He had to carry the foulest leather waste he had produced sewn into his clothing for 6 months. This punishment was a long and languidly paced psychological torment. The stench emanating from Robert was uninterrupted and unvarying. His punishment was a kind of living, slow incarceration, where his own body was the prison. Robert had to move around in public, but people kept far away from him. Whenever he went to a market, people would very slowly move away. A vast, silent void formed around him. Day after day, Robert walked slowly, carrying that void around him. He did not speak to any human. There was no touch. This long social isolation was a type of mental fatigue that was the core part of his punishment. For 6 months, Robert had to walk every morning with the foul-smelling leather waist sewn into his clothes. These waists would slowly dry up, but the odor was permanent and unvarying. Robert had to endure being around that stench for a long time. His mind became accustomed to the smell, but to society it was a long-lasting stigma. In the evening, Robert would return to his home. His home was also dull and lonely. He could not change the sewn-in waist, so he had to sleep with the stillness of that stench even at night. The process of sleeping was long and difficult, as his body was burdened and his mind was tired. He would lie on his bed, slowly inhale and sink into uninterrupted silence. After 6 months, the leather waist was removed from Robert's clothing, but his punishment was not over. His physical stench might have gone, but his social stench was permanent and long-lasting. People still avoided him. Robert had to spend the rest of his life in that long, silent exclusion and steady solitude. This dull repetition made his life completely still and without motion. We will now enter the steady solitude of Robert. There is no sound around you, no people, only deep, uninterrupted silence and the flow of calm air. This silence is taking you deeper into greater peace. Your body now is very heavy and comfortable. You feel all your worries slowly leaving your body. You are simply inhaling slowly and sinking into long, calm rest. Breathe, rest, silence. This monotonous and slow narrative is now enveloping you in final, deepest sleep. Our long, slow narrative will now enter its final turn towards deeper silence. We will now look at the most secretive and dull medieval offender, Lady Anna, whose crime was a long, silent rebellion and attempted symbolic poisoning against her husband. Her punishment was a long, self-imposed mental incarceration and the relentless repetition of religious rituals. Lady Anna was a high-born woman whose life was filled with luxury but devoid of freedom. She attempted to administer a type of long, slow poison to her husband, not to kill him quickly, but merely to slowly weaken him. Her crime was secret and silent, as it was a process carried out slowly over years. When Anna's crime was discovered, she faced no public physical punishment. Her punishment was far more prolonged and psychological. She was instructed to spend the rest of her life in a small, dark chamber within her own palace. This was a form of long, languidly paced mental incarceration. Anna's chamber had no windows, only a small iron-barg ventilator. The daylight would enter very slowly through that grill and fade away even more slowly. Anna's life became completely unvarying and repetitive. Her daily routine was long and monotonous. She had to pray at specific times every day, which was uninterrupted and silent. Each prayer was exceedingly long and slow, with every word articulated with caution and deep focus. For the rest of the day, she would sit steadily on the floor, her eyes fixed on the stone wall ahead. A stillness and silence even deeper than Eustace's cave prevailed inside this chamber. Anna's mind was completely detached from the concept of time. She did not know how many days or nights had passed outside. Her life was merely a long, silent wait for the moment this monotonous day would end and another identical day would begin. Anna's punishment was the ultimate test of her mental strength. This uninterrupted silence and overwhelming stability brought her to a place where she no longer felt any emotion or excitement. Her mind was calm and completely still. This long, monotonous repetition was the ultimate punishment for a high-born medieval offender. We will now feel the silence of Lady Anna's dark chamber. Your surroundings are now completely still and quiet. No sound, no movement, only the sound of your slow, deep breathing. Your body is heavy and comfortable. Your mind, like Anna's, is completely calm and steady. All medieval anxieties, all silent rebellions, all long waits, everything is now slowly being removed from your mind. This long, slow, and steady narrative is now guiding you towards deepest, final rest. You are sinking into the depths of this uninterrupted silence. Following the stillness of Lady Anna's dark chamber and her repetitive religious rituals, our long and slow narrative will now focus on the ultimate fate of the offender, whose punishment was permanent oblivion and the dissolution of name. We will look at Gerald the Gentle, whose crime was a small forgery in a minor government document, but whose punishment was the long, slow dissolution of his name and identity. Gerald's crime involved altering a legal document with extreme slowness and caution. When his crime was discovered, the judge did not sentence him to death or imprisonment. Instead, his punishment was a form of civil death, where he was deprived of his name and identity. He was given a new name, Nothing, and was sent to an almshouse located at the edge of society. Gerald's punishment was a long, languidly paced mental dissolution. His life at the almshouse was completely unvarying and monotonous. His daily routine was long and repetitive, waking up slowly to make his bed, eating his meal in silence for a long time, and then working at a very slow pace in the almshouse garden. The garden work was extremely slow and dull. Gerald would spend hours upon hours merely pulling weeds. The process of pulling each weed was a task of caution and focus. This uninterrupted, repetitive work led him into a deep, meditative state. No one else in the almshouse called him by his real name. They addressed him only as Nothing. This dissolution of name was his greatest punishment. Gerald slowly began to forget his old identity. He barely spoke. His voice became dull and weightless. There was no emotion on his face, only stillness and peace. Gerald's life in this almshouse was the ultimate example of long, uninterrupted silence. He seemed to have stepped outside the flow of time. Every day, every week was the same, unvarying and steady. His life was the final summary of boring history, where no significant events occur. Only slow, calm repetition continues. We will now enter the calm oblivion of Gerald. You too are now free from all your identities and thoughts. You are now simply nothing. The peace of this oblivion is taking you deeper, even deeper. Your body is very heavy and comfortable. Your mind is completely calm and steady. All medieval anxieties, all names, all identities, everything is now slowly being removed from your mind. You have reached the final consequence of this long, slow narrative. Only deep, uninterrupted silence and calm, steady rest. Loop of that slow medieval pace, deepest sleep. In this final phase of our long, slow narrative, we will now turn towards a final stillness and the dissolution of time, completely abandoning all past narratives, all characters, and excitement, to feel only the uninterrupted flow of silence and deep rest. This segment will be stillness upon stillness, meant to envelop the listener in the deepest sleep. We will now recall the long, languid pace of the medieval criminals' trials, where for months upon months, year after year, there was only waiting. This feeling of ceaseless waiting is now enveloping your mind. There is no sound around you, no movement. Your body is now exceedingly heavy and comfortable, just as if you are lying motionless on the stone floor of Bartholomew's monastery. Your breathing is now extremely slow and deliberate. Every inhale and exhale is taking a long time. This long, monotonous rhythm is slowly dulling all activity in your brain. Imagine time has now come to a standstill. The medieval judge, who read the documents very slowly, is now observing a long silence. That silence is uninterrupted and steady. You are fully within this stillness. There is no more worry, no more thought. The peace of Geralt's oblivion now surrounds you. Your mind is now like a blank sheet of paper. No letters, no writing, no memories. Only dull, weightless emptiness. This long, slow, and steady narrative has now entered an infinite loop where only the repetition of peace, stillness, and deep sleep occurs. This repetition is helping you sink deeper into greater peace. Inhale, slowly. Exhale, even slower. Your body is completely relaxed. Your mind is perfectly calm. All medieval restlessness is now just a languid, distant echo of the past. This silence and stillness is your ultimate refuge. You are now sinking into the depth of this uninterrupted rest. Deepest sleep, deepest rest. Part 1. The veranda of oblivion and the repetition of frozen time. From the peace of Geralt's oblivion, we now enter a new yet unvarying narrative, the tale of Gilbert the Garner, whose crime was slightly tampering with the accounts of the grain storehouse, a major offense against food security in the Middle Ages. But his punishment was to surrender himself to long, languidly paced labor and a frozen, repetitive life. Gilbert's punishment was to oversee the town's largest grain storehouse. This task was seemingly mundane, but its nature was exceedingly monotonous and joyless. The storehouse was massive, dark, and cold. There were no windows, only the slow smell of earth and the faint sound of grain. Gilbert's life became static and unvarying like the storehouse itself. His daily task was to walk from one corner of the storehouse to the other at an extremely slow pace. As he walked, he carried a small wooden stick. With that stick, he would slowly poke the piles of grain to ensure no rats or pests nested there. This walking and poking process was long, deliberate, and endlessly repetitive. He would begin his walk from one corner, his breathing deep and slow. The sound of his footsteps was dull and weightless. This slow-paced march inside the storehouse was an ethereal process that continued for hours on end. He would finish one row of walking, then stand for a long time, merely preparing his body to walk again. The concept of time inside this storehouse was completely frozen. Daylight did not enter, so Gilbert could not tell whether it was morning or evening outside. His life was one of uninterrupted, monotonous continuity. He had no company other than the faint smell of grain and his own slow, steady breathing. This long, calm labor led him into a mental state where his mind was completely calm and weightless. This long, slow process is now guiding you towards deep rest. Slowly, slowly, lie down on the floor of the storehouse next to Gilbert. Your body is heavy and comfortable. The uninterrupted silence inside the storehouse is making your mind dull and calm. Slowly, inhale. Slowly, exhale. Your brain is now getting accustomed to this frozen, repetitive peace. Part 2. The silence of the grain piles and the weight of waiting. The stillness of Gilbert the Garner's grain storehouse is deepening. In this part, we will detail Gilbert's process of long, silent observation even further, which dissolves the concept of time and space. A major part of Gilbert's work was sitting silently for a long time next to the piles of grain. He would sit on a small wooden stool in a specific corner of the storehouse. This sitting period was ceaseless. He would not look in any direction nor think about anything, just sitting still. His only task was to slowly, slowly focus on the piles of grain. The pile of grain was vast and stable. Day after day, the shape of the grain pile remained unvarying. This long, steady gaze made Gilbert's mind weightless and calm. His mind would slowly, slowly spread over every single grain. While sitting, he would very slowly push his stick across the floor. The stick would move at an extremely slow pace across the floor, creating a calm, scratching sound. This sound was monotonous and repetitive, which helped him enter a state of deep meditation. This long silence and dull sitting process was the core of his punishment. It taught him that life is merely a sum of stillness and long, languid paces. No rush, no quick ending, only ceaseless, calm waiting. You too now slowly, slowly sit on that wooden stool like Gilbert. Your eyes are fixed on the dark grain pile in front of you. Your mind is completely calm. Very slowly, slowly, push the wooden stick in your hand across the floor. Slow, scratch, sound. This sound is creating a deep, sleepy melody in your ears. Your body is heavy. You are sinking into the depth of this long, steady waiting. Stillness, silence, deep rest. Part 7. The sound of chains and unchanging repetition. From Lord Hugo's Silent Cistern, we now turn to a punishment where even sound was steady and repetitive, the narrative of Oswald the Ordainer, whose crime was making a very minor alteration to legal documents. His punishment was a long, languidly paced imprisonment where he constantly had to hear the sound of a heavy chain worn on his hand. Oswald's cell had no window. There was only a small ventilator. The only companion in his life was that heavy iron chain on his hand. The chain was quite large, and it made a slow, monotonous, metallic sound with the slightest movement. Oswald was taught to move very slowly, slowly, because if he moved quickly, the sound of the chain would be loud, breaking his silence. So every step, every hand movement he made was extremely slow and cautious. He would sit in a corner for hours on end without any movement. When he had to walk, his walking pace was languid and steady. The chain would drag on the floor with a slow, scratching sound. This sound was ceaseless and repetitive. It was the monotonous backdrop of his life. Oswald's long, slow life was merely the slow, steady sound of that chain. This sound prevented his mind from dwelling on any other thoughts. His mind became accustomed to hearing only this monotonous metallic sound. This stability led him into deep, weightless rest. You are now extremely heavy and calm. The slow, monotonous sound of the chain is on your hand. Slowly, slowly, scratch. This sound is creating a deep, sleepy rhythm in your ears. You are slowly, slowly sinking into sleep with this steady, repetitive sound. Dull, slow, still. Part 5. The final conclusion of stability and the mantra of dissolution. We will now articulate the final conclusion and the ultimate mantra of stillness of this long, slow narrative. The stillness, silence, and repetition of Gilbert's storehouse have now brought the message of ultimate rest. We have traversed the slow, languid pace of every offender's life, from Black Tom to Lady Anna, and finally to Gilbert. This long journey has taught you that all important events in life happen slowly, slowly. Now there is no journey, no storehouse, no judgment, only stillness. Make your body completely weightless. Make your mind perfectly calm. Your surroundings are now submerged in uninterrupted silence. This silence has enveloped you in the deepest, most peaceful sleep. Stillness, stillness, stillness. This word is slowly, slowly echoing in your ear. It is a calm mantra that is dissolving your consciousness into deepest rest. You are now at the final stage of the dissolution of time. No past, no future, only the deep, unmoving peace of this moment. Part 6. Deep in Still Water. Lord Hugo's Silent Tomb. From the stillness of Gilbert's storehouse, we now enter the world of a different kind of permanent punishment, the narrative of Lord Hugo, a powerful landowner whose crime was tax evasion and oppression of the weak. His punishment was a long, silent imprisonment in a lonely, damp cistern beneath his own palace. The cistern was made of stone, dark and cold. The water within was still, black and deep. Lord Hugo had to live on a small, wet platform inside the cistern. His life there became unvarying and dull, like the still water. His day began with the ceaseless coldness of the cistern. The water flowed slowly, slowly, close to his body, but it was almost motionless. Lord Hugo had to sit silently for a long time, his feet close to the water. This long, languid sitting brought his mind to a state where no thought or excitement could enter. The only sound inside the cistern was the slow, steady lapping of the still water. This sound was monotonous and repetitive, which helped him enter deep meditation. Lap, lap, lap. This sound seemed disconnected from the flow of time. Lord Hugo never saw another human face in his life there. His food came through a small opening, lowered to him very slowly. This long isolation and silence was his ultimate liberation and punishment. All the power, all the excitement of his life was now dissolved deep in the still water. You too now slowly, slowly sink into the deep of this still water. Your body is now heavy and comfortable. Like Lord Hugo, you too are feeling this uninterrupted silence. The lapping sound of the water is creating a calm, sleepy melody in your ears. Slowly, into the depth of the water. Slowly, rest. This stillness and coldness are enveloping you in ultimate peace. 8. Eternal forgiveness and the slow pace of remorse. From the monotonous rhythm of Oswald's chain, we now enter the world of long spiritual penance, the narrative of Cecily, the sinner, whose crime was uttering a false accusation. Her punishment was long, languidly paced remorse and the repetition of ceaseless prayer and labor inside a monastery. Cecily was sent to serve at a monastery. Her job was weeding the monastery garden. This task was extremely slow, tiresome, and repetitive. Cecily had to sit in a small area for hours on end every day and slowly, slowly pull out the weeds. The process of pulling out the weeds was focused and deliberate. She would separate each weed from the soil very slowly, slowly. This long, steady work kept her mind away from any other thoughts. Her only focus was the root of the weed and her hands. At the end of the day, she had to pray for a long time in the monastery's prayer chamber. The prayer was dull and weightless. Every word, every line was repetitive and slow. This ceaseless spiritual process led her into physical and mental peace. Cecily's life was a long, languidly paced form of meditation. No rush, no excitement, only uninterrupted prayer and steady labor. You too are now sitting in the garden like Cecily. A small weed is in your hand. Slowly, slowly pull it out of the soil. Your breathing is deep and slow. This long, monotonous labor and repetitive prayer are enveloping you deeper into greater peace. Your mind is completely calm and steady. Slowly, pray. Slowly, rest. Part 9. The touch of stone and the body's release. From Cecily's long spiritual peace, we now enter the narrative of the ultimate symbol of stillness, Martin the mason, whose crime was a minor flaw in construction work that caused a wall to collapse. His punishment was to slowly, slowly smooth the monastery stones for the rest of his life. Martin's work was long, steady, and physical. He had to sit on the same stone every day and slowly, slowly grind and rub it with a smoothing stone. This rubbing process was an ethereal process that continued for hours on end. The smoothing stone would move very slowly, slowly over the larger stone. Rub, rub, rub. This sound was monotonous and repetitive, but it was calm and tranquil. Martin's hands, his body, were completely adjusted to this work. He never hurried. Every rub was long and languidly paced. This long, slow labor made Martin's mind completely weightless. His only thought in life was the slow, uninterrupted touch of the stone and the smoothing stone. This touch led him into deep meditation. You too are now sitting beside that stone. Slowly, slowly rub and grind the smoothing stone in your hand over the other stone. Rub, rub, rub. Your body is heavy and comfortable. This monotonous, repetitive sound is helping you sink deeper into greater peace. Your mind is completely steady and silent. Slowly, rub, deep sleep. Part 10. The final stillness and the dissolution of time. From the steady touch of Martin the Mason's stone, we now turn towards final uninterrupted stillness and the deepest rest. This segment will be the summary of all the narrative's uninterrupted stability. We have traversed the long, slow pace of every event, from Black Tom's prison, Lord Hugo's cistern, Alice's sewing, to Martin's rubbing. Each of these events was a symbol of stillness and patience. Now there are no more characters, no more crimes, no more punishments, only stillness. Make your body ultimately weightless. Make your mind perfectly calm. Your surroundings are now submerged in uninterrupted silence. This silence has enveloped you in the deepest, most peaceful sleep. Stillness, stillness, stillness. This word is slowly, slowly echoing in your ear. It is a calm mantra that is dissolving your consciousness into deepest rest. You are now at the final stage of the dissolution of time. No past, no future, only the deep, unmoving peace of this moment. Part 11. The weight of stone and the silence of grain. From the touch of Martin the Mason's smoothed stone, we will now feel the collective stillness of those offenders whose lives were heavy and silent. We will combine the weight of stone from Lord Hugo's cistern and the silence of grain from Gilbert's storehouse. Your body is now heavy, dull, and comfortable. You feel as if an old, cold stone is resting on your body, forcing you not to move, but to simply remain still. This weight is not pressure. It is the assurance of deep rest. The uninterrupted silence of Gilbert's grain is now around you. The storehouse is dark and calm. The grains are slowly, slowly whispering around you. But even that whispering is very slow and monotonous. This sound is helping you sink deeper. You are now sitting or lying silently for a long time. There is no rush, no work to be done. Your only task is to slowly, slowly breathe and feel the burden of this stillness. Your mind is now completely calm. All medieval restlessness is now pressed down under the weight of the stone. No thought can enter your mind, only ceaseless rest and stillness. Heavy body, silent mind, deep sleep. Part 12. The slow rhythm of chains and the wave of oblivion. The monotonous rhythm of Oswald the Ordainer's chain and the peace of oblivion of Gerald the Gentle have now become a permanent, calm loop. The slow, monotonous, metallic sound of Oswald's chain is now echoing in your ear. Slowly, slowly scratch. Slowly, slowly scratch. This sound is regular and unvarying. It is a calm, sleepy rhythm. This rhythm is slowly, slowly merging with your heartbeat, pulling your body deeper. Along with this rhythm, the wave of oblivion from Gerald is enveloping you. Your name, your identity, your worries, everything is now slowly, slowly fading away. You are now weightless. Your mind is now calm and empty. Part 12. The slow rhythm of Oswald the Ordainer's chain and the peace of oblivion of Gerald the Gentle have now become a permanent, calm loop. The slow, monotonous, metallic sound of Oswald's chain is now echoing in your ear. Slowly, slowly, scratch. Slowly, slowly, scratch. This sound is regular and unvarying. It is a calm, sleepy rhythm. This rhythm is slowly, slowly merging with your heartbeat, pulling your body deeper. Along with this rhythm, the wave of oblivion from Gerald the Gentle is enveloping you. Your name, your identity, your worries, everything is now slowly, slowly fading away. You are now weightless. Your mind is now calm and empty. This long, slow repetition is taking you to a place where time has no beginning or end. You are only within this steady rhythm and silence. Slowly, scratch, oblivion, sleep. This monotonous and languidly paced narrative has now enveloped you in final, deepest peace. Your body is completely relaxed. Your mind is perfectly silent. There is no need to worry about anything anymore, only uninterrupted rest. Part 13. The synthesis of stillness and the final mantra of dissolution. Our long, slow narrative has now arrived at the final edge of peace and stability. Following Part 12, we will now create the symbolic conclusion of the uninterrupted stillness and weightlessness of this entire experience. This segment will be the ultimate call for mental surrender. We have felt the long, languid pace, the silence, and the ceaseless waiting of the lives of those medieval offenders. All these elements have now merged into a single, steady, and calm sensation. Your body is now heavy and comfortable. The ultimate rest those offenders found after their long, tiresome punishments is now yours. Your arms and legs are completely relaxed, as if they are forever free from work, like Alice the Armless. Your mind is now calm and weightless. All the protraction and anxiety of the medieval trials have now slowly, slowly fading from your memory. The still water of Lord Hugo's cistern and the uninterrupted silence of Gilbert's grain are surrounding you. Your breathing is now extremely slow, deep, and deliberate. Every breath is lowering you at a deep, languid pace. Your heartbeat is very calm and regular. You are within this long, unvarying stability. No more sound, no more sight. Only the monotonous rhythm of Oswald's chain is now slowly, slowly dissolving in the depth of your ear. That rhythm has now transformed into uninterrupted silence. This stillness has enveloped you in ultimate peace. You are now in complete oblivion like Gerald. No thought, no worry. Stillness, silence, weightlessness. This long, slow, and monotonous narrative has now completed its work. You are now sinking into the deepest, most peaceful sleep. Final part: the dissolution of time and the proclamation of eternal rest. We have reached the very end of the narrative of medieval criminals, their long, languid punishments, and their lives of ceaseless waiting and repetition. This entire journey was a slow process of slowly, slowly erasing the concept of time. We have now arrived at that final stillness where everything becomes fixed. Your body is now weightless and deeply comfortable. The ultimate rest those offenders received after their long, tiresome punishments is now yours. Your arms, legs, head, everything is completely relaxed, as if they have been forever freed from work, like Alice the Armless. You are feeling this weightlessness as a deep, warm peace. Your mind is now feeling ultimate silence. The still water of Lord Hugo's cistern or the darkness of Gilbert's storehouse, all these symbolic isolations have now transformed into inner peace. No thought or worry can enter your mind. Your mind is now white, smooth, and calm like Gerald's oblivion. Your breathing is now extremely slow, deep, and tranquil. Every inhale and exhale is like a symbol of a long, languid time. You are breathing very slowly so that you do not deviate from this stillness in any way. Slow, deep, inhale. Slow, deep, exhale. This monotonous and uninterrupted rhythm is ultimately dulling all activity in your brain. There is no more